was out last night with Farley. We were at dinner, and my Aussie mate, and he said, "How the hell did you guys start this thing, or how'd this turn into this?" And we started talking, and Andy used to have me and a bunch. It's just a good, fun story. Reflecting back, Andy used to have a bunch of traders down here. I told my wife, I said, "I feel like I'm in a bad spot." I said, "We used to come down here and talk about beer and barbecue, didn't we, Daddy?" And I said, "Now it's a lot of healthy diet stuff up here. I may get a complex before I leave." But we were laughing last night. We said, I remember back to 2012. I get hit up. I get pitched on a farming idea out of Brazil. I get hit, buy an ethanol plant out of Texas, introduce Carter Williams with iSelect, and I buy Facebook off the open, all in. Put my tired wife's 401k in it. Remember Carter, like, "You've lost your mind." We buy more on the break. Carter, sorry, but 3 out of 4 have been really good investments. No, I'm kidding you, Carter. I'm giving you a hard time. They've been great. This has been awesome. Carter grew this thing, John Santee included. John, friends of ours, tried to get us in some things. We sat around last night with everyone talking about interesting marketing, market ideas, pitches for new businesses, new ag tech startups. So I just wanted to say the networking has been incredible. And Carter, I appreciate all the hard work you and your team have done. Mike, Craig, John, the whole crew, Andy, you guys for putting it all together. So it was awesome. I look back at time and see the things. So thank you guys again. I've also learned a lot from Carter and his team on how they look at businesses and ag tech startups in particular in our wheelhouse. And I debate Carter, and I kind of want to set the tone a little bit with this premise. I hear Carter talk a lot about price. Well, I've been lucky to learn from Carter on a few things, but I was also lucky to learn from a few good CEOs that have worked with Jack Welch, Bob Nardelli, and a few of others. And they always said people don't buy price. People buy value. So when people talk about we get the price down, things are going to be better. That's not necessarily true. If we walked in Walmart right now and there was a giant laser disc, remember back after the betas and they came out with the big laser disc? What if you saw a whole bin of them for a nickel? You going to buy it? That's low price. It's not value. There's no value. People buy value. So there's a huge debate about price and value when I start talking to a lot of ag tech startups. There's also a big debate, and I'll challenge your thought on this. I continue to hear a lot of ag tech startups talk about, "I'll make you more efficient." I had a conversation with Howard Buffett. Howard had been in farming, his whole life. His son was farming. He said his son got out of farming this last year. 6 years, I think, his son was farming for him. Howard said, "If I take one more step to being more efficient, I'm going to be broke." It's an interesting thing to think about. Think about that. If I take one more step to being more efficient, I'll be out of this game. Someone has to figure out how to make me more competitive. Two wildly different items. So they can come to you for $3 here, $2 there, $5 for this, an acre, and make you all the more efficient as you'll ever want to be. But can you compete with a globalized commodity out of Brazil, out of Ukraine, Argentina? You're in a commoditized market. If you're doing number 2 yellow corn, you're doing beans, you're in a commoditized space. We've traded it a million times, Andy and I, in different markets. If the market deems you're oversupplied, it looks to seek out and search the high-cost producer and basically rip their face off. And if you're the high-cost producer, for the first time probably in history, Andy and I talked at dinner, they look to the United States to cut acres. We got high-cost producers all around. Maybe because they've become too efficient. For the price, I don't know. And that's kind of the challenge that, as I sat here yesterday and listened to a lot of folks, and that's the conundrum you got to think about. Are you making the farmer too efficient and not competitive enough? Can he compete and stay in the environment and stay in the space? I don't know. What's happened to the cost of TVs? As technology comes on, as Carter and everyone here will tell you, as technology builds, it's inherently deflationary. Price of TVs come down. Guys that are sitting thinking corn's $6, $7, maybe on a weather scare. But technology comes on and it's disseminated across the world now. It's going to drive prices lower. So you have to define what your role is in the space as any business owner. Can I be a low-cost producer and compete in a globalized commodity, number 2 yellow corn or beans? Or do I have to diversify and have a specialty crop? And diversifying the specialty crop is what we talked about with the healthy diets and those things. That's where I say it's critically important. You have to define that role as a farmer, which they're not good at. Longer visions on business models, a lot of farmers. They're learning. And then can you afford to take on all the latest and greatest to become more efficient and still stay competitive? So that's how I wanted to kind of set the stage with my friends up here, with Tim and the gang. And I think the first question, and I'll come over, and Tim, you kind of talked about it as we were talking back there. What is it that the farmer needs to see to be extremely competitive in this space?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the technology that's available is phenomenal. I mean, basically the farmers stampeded continuously with technologies and faced with those challenges and trying to make those decisions about what's the best fit, what brings the most value. And I think there's a lot of tech fatigue that exists out there with growers. And I think one of the biggest challenges that the startups really face is trying to bring something that is of value to the grower. There's a lot of cool things, there's a lot of technologies, there's a lot of things that we can embrace to try to make us more competitive, to be more efficient, and all of those things, and it's really cool. But there's a real gap between that technology and reality on the farm. We talk a lot about this internally from the standpoint that we pencil whip efficiencies all day long, but there's a reality about what really happens out there and what really takes place and what has to happen in order for us to get the job done and to be competitive and to be efficient and combine all of those things together. And so a farmer is faced with so many challenges because he's wearing so many different hats. He's wearing a marketing hat, he's wearing a production hat, he's got to be a finance guy, he's got to wear all these hats, and really what the producer wants to focus on is production. And I think our challenge is to figure out a way and to develop models that enable him to do what he does best and bring some of those technologies that can drive that value to him so he can focus on the thing that he's passionate most about, the thing he does well, and bring some things to him that will enable him to do that. So that's kind of the large, big picture over here.
Gary, what do you think on this similar subject?
Yeah, so I believe as far as new technology and business models, I think in general it's a better business model to sell an aspirin than a vitamin. People are more apt to buy it. So just to give a little bit of background about myself, I've been in the strawberry industry for 45 years, based in Florida. So I'm not really in the commodity segment. We have branding. We've got 220,000 Facebook fans on my Wish Farms business. But Harvest CROO Robotics, that's a startup that I started with the help of the industry, the strawberry industry. I've got all my major competitors. 70% of the U.S. strawberry industry is invested with me. So this is the industry has a major headache right now with labor. And so my competitors all recognize that. And when I went out to them and tried to form this alliance, it wasn't that hard because they all saw the same thing. So when developers are looking to develop technology for the farms, they really need to be at the farm level, talking to growers and really understanding what growers need, not what they think they need sitting in Silicon Valley. Our startup is in Tampa, Florida, right next to the strawberry industry in Plant City, and we have farms in California, so we're very close. So I think that's a big disconnect that happens is developers think that they know what a grower needs, and they really don't.
Can I comment on that quickly, Kevin? I really appreciate what you're saying because I think there really needs to be a farmer-centric focus, and it seems that there's not. It's not about bringing technology to a grower and saying, well, look, we have a solution for you here. What do you think? It's engaging that farmer along the whole development of that in its entire process to bring the technology that's really meaningful and brings value to him. And so I think that's where there's often a disconnect between what's being brought to the farm and what's really there. And so there's an opportunity for startups to allow farmers to help develop those solutions and to be participants in revenue sharing of that, or some sort of equity stake, participating in a more deeper level in an advisory position to really bring product that has value to the field, down to the field level.
Greg, what do you see on, how do they, along those same lines, but then what can the ag tech startups or some of the people do to, like Gary's saying, get in, to the farmer and learn more about how to, sell to them and what their real needs are?
Yeah, it's complicated, right? In Illinois alone, excuse me, you got 43,000 farmers, and across this country you'll have 550,000 soybean farmers. Can you imagine if that was any other business? So if you have your technology company and you're trying to hit 550,000 people, that's going to be an impossibility. So a technology for our industry, at least in a bulk commodities industry, that's commodities sometimes for strawberries and so forth, but you really got to look at how can you hit the largest number of people with the least amount of effort, right? Trying to go to each individual farmer, that's just, you're not going to make it, because each producer is different. There are some commonalities on things, but there's a lot of differences as well, because even if you just look at the state of Illinois, between southern Illinois and northern Illinois, that's a 6-hour drive. Different soil types, different weather patterns, different people, different politics, different things going on in these industries. So you got to really figure out how to mass scale, I think that's been mentioned a few times here, your technology, the things you want to get in farmers' hands. But at the same time, like was mentioned here by Tim, every day somebody is trying to get into their farmers' pockets. And I'll say that because on our side, we all know about what's going on in China, and the soybean industry is really taking a big hit here. But as a farmer, this host is getting bled from a lot of different points, right? You're a price taker. So you've already got the ABCDs on one side, you've got the grain elevators there. On the other side, you've got technology companies coming in. So the farmer doesn't have enough blood to feed all these industries. So I think that's what's important here, is understanding the culture of our industry and really understanding that it's been decades upon decades upon decades of people really trying to come to these folks, trying to sell something to them. So you really got to have, like they said here, a strong value proposition, not just to one individual, because your business won't make it, but to a multitude of people, multitude geographies as well. And that's what you really got to take into consideration of this. And that's where your technology will get adopted by producers, I think. But you got to make it easy. It's got to fit within their business model as well. Don't make it where I have to do more work for just a marginal amount of money. If it's 5% more, it's not worth it. It's not worth my time. Even 10% is not worth my time. $1 extra a bushel on beans, somewhat attractive, but if I have to do all this other stuff, forget it. It may sound good to us in the business world, but out there, it's not worth my time and effort. I'm comfortable with what I've got, and I can make things happen. Now that's a general statement. That's not all producers. You'll have some that are really sophisticated. You have some that are not, that are laggards. We all know about the bell curve and how that works. So there's a huge opportunity here, but you have to be really strategic in the way you approach our industry.
I think you have to be strategic too in how you approach who you're trying to target. The farmers, number one, the sales process is a lot longer than most other sales processes. The farm gate's pretty difficult to get in, break through. There's a trust barrier that has to be established and developed, and they're very secondary loop oriented, meaning you have to find the influencers in those particular communities. You have to get that influencer to understand and know what your total goal and objective is longer term, and get them to try a few acres, get them to do a few things. The rest of the farmers want to watch. Their secondary loop for sure. And they want to watch how that plays out, and they want to see some things. You have to understand, maybe up front you have to bite the bullet and pencil in more to try and gain market share from brand ambassadors to try and make that footprint and then get that secondary loop. I'm sure you've seen the same in the strawberry industry, correct?
Yeah, so my problem's a little different though that we have in with the labor situation,
Right.
Because this is such a big problem. Growers are ready, willing to adopt the new technology, and we've actually established a business plan where we're going to provide harvesting as a service to the growers, so it doesn't disrupt how they do business right now. Now they pay humans a piece rate on a weekly basis. they would pay the Harvest Crew Robotics company the same thing. So while it's going to be disruptive to the labor market, maybe it won't be disruptive to the grower's business model.
And what are you seeing on your guys? You guys get approached every day by
Yeah,
a lot of salesmen trying to sell a lot of things.
Yeah, there is a lot of opportunity. I want to get back to kind of a little bit what Craig commented on is just the fact that there's the value proposition has to be rooted in reality, and I think there's a little bit of a disconnect. I mean, we have a lot of, I guess you'd call them ag tech show ponies, for lack of a better word, where they're showing all these things that they can do for you, but there's a real disconnect between what's really happening out there and the challenge that the grower has. The grower has tremendous labor challenges. Finance, huge issue. A need to be more vertically integrated. The reality is most farmers, we stand in the way of ourselves in a lot of cases. We're in our own way, so to speak, to embracing change, because this is a culture and an industry that finds change very challenging and very difficult. And when you're adopting new technologies, that change is much more, progresses much more slowly than what you're used to in some other industries. And so the adoption of that is not fast coming, and often in cases, and people have got to be convinced, they've got to see it, they've got to understand the value proposition and what's possible. And yeah, there are some great opportunities out there, and I think we have a lot of folks that are focused on the very things that's been mentioned here, that are trying to bring value to the grower and are being more farmer centric, and there's some good things like that happening. So that's encouraging. But we have a long way to go, and I think there's a huge chasm here still that exists that's very real for the guys that are out there getting it done every day.
Can I add to that as well? I mean, if you're looking for an opportunity, we're looking at this in Illinois, and I think you're even hearing in Washington, D.C. about broadband, right? And we have it in urban areas, you got access to broadband. We've got 1G connectivity in Bloomington, Illinois. But you go a few miles down the road and you don't have it. So a lot of the technologies we need in our 200 million acre industry, if not 300 million acres, is access to broadband. Now, a lot of the technologies that are in this room that want to make it to the marketplace, you'll have better access. Because right now it's a challenge to make things work if you're in rural America. You just don't have that line of sight things. You got people putting microwave things on top of elevators. I mean, this is barbaric, frankly, right? When you're putting a satellite dish on an elevator tower because it's the highest point in the county. It's almost like a third world country, to be honest with you. So there's got to be a commitment by this country or states or somebody else out in this room that wants to get broadband out there. It's a huge, it's no different than electricity, than roads, than rivers. This broadband is critical for our industry to propel itself past South American countries or Eastern European countries or African countries in this space, because it is happening in those places. Because it's using World Bank money or IMF money to make those kind of things happen, but it's not even happening in our own economy. So a lot of great intellect, a lot of great technology, a lot of great power. The infrastructure is just not there to really accommodate it, to be honest with you.
And I think that alludes to the fact, like we talked earlier, when you get the low hovering satellites that are being put up now in all kinds of other nations, and they're going to gain access to the broadband as well. And that access allows them, what we always said, we thought we always had a decided advantage here in the United States. We still believe we do have a decided advantage, but we had a much bigger advantage. And now that the secret sauce and some of the technology and the farming practices have been, more readily available in third world nations and other countries, it puts more pressure on us to become more and more competitive, because they just have cheaper labor, they have cheaper land prices, cheaper input costs. And we have a strong dollar. They have a depreciating valuation in the currency. That's another huge play that makes it tough to be competitive. So I think you have to, like you were saying, put yourself in the farmer's shoes. And I know it's hard. You go out there and you bang your head against the wall because you know you can make them more efficient. You know you can help them on the efficiency side. But when you add it all up and those numbers come down the pipe, like you said, Tim, it's tough. I mean, I tell him when we were talking backstage, what I asked him, I said, how's it going on the organic side? What are you guys doing on the organic now? Because the last time I was in Wilson to visit him, they had 1,200 acres organic.
We're not in the organic space right now. I think we were probably a little too aggressive. But there were a lot of other things that going on that drove that decision, which made a lot of sense at the time. But the reality is to make that transition is huge. And I think if I had it to do all over again, I think I know how I would approach it. Not that it's the right approach, but it would be much, much smaller. And I think the reality is to make that transition, there's a lot of things that have to happen. And the wherewithal, people just don't have the wherewithal to make those transitions very easily. The capital, it's just, because the reality is you probably need to leave the land fallow and position yourself to go into organic rather during that 3-year period rather than trying to launch off into it right out of the gate and go through some sort of transitional phase. There's a lot of challenges there with it, but I think there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of great things that are going to come out of that space, and I'm still optimistic about it, and it's not something that we're going to disregard. We're going to shelf it at the moment. But
I think the takeaway is that just even you guys are some of the most astute, business-oriented farmers there are, and you still find that there are times it's difficult to make it pencil and make it work, and it becomes extremely difficult.
Yeah, and it's a prioritization of kind of what you feel is important. But I think that the biggest challenge sometimes is just to face reality that this isn't working, and then the quicker you can raise your hand and say it's not working, and we need to go a different direction, the better off you are typically. So.
And I think when we get back to understanding how farmers, we'll hear a lot of times, farmers are slow to change and slow to adapt and adopt, I should say, new technology, and a lot of that goes, if you think, I mean, it's a lifestyle to them. It's their lineage. It's history. And they mix up sometimes tradition and change a little bit. And they think if they change the farm, that, it was their dad's and his dad's. And many of them grew up there 4 and 5 generations. And it's an emotional thing for them. And to change from, say, corn to the gentleman that diversified into Illinois and grows whiskey now. I mean, I'm telling you right now, my dad wouldn't have done that. My dad wouldn't have made that move. He wouldn't have let me come talk to him about turning over prime number 2 yellow corn ground. Hey, let's make this a whiskey farm. And because the millennials love to hear a story about whiskey, and we'll grow this whiskey, different types of corn seed from all over the world, different varieties of whiskey. Well, now that's really blossomed into an amazing business for them. But my father probably would never have been that open and receptive to changing the history of the farm to that level and that degree. So that's something also I think that we should think about. Yeah.
So yeah, Kevin, I think that the innovators are a lot of times the ones that survive. And one thing I learned early on, you can't get too sentimental about business.
Right.
Our business, when I started in 1974, we were very diversified. We were growing bell peppers and squash and you name it, all the truck farm items. And then we had berries. That was just a winter crop for us. And by the 2000s, it was my people that I actually listened to that are my top advisors and my forward thinkers. They advised me, we've got to just focus on berries. And then when we did start focusing on berries, our sales and our profitability has mushroomed. But it's where you've got to be willing to change. I mean, you've got to be able to, see the handwriting on the wall sometimes that something isn't working. You don't just keep beating your head against the wall.
I agree.
Yeah.
When I first went to Chicago to trade, I remember it was maybe the first month or two, I was getting kind of kicked around a little bit. And one of the old guys says, hey, you're from a small rural town. You know a lot of farmers. Just do the opposite of what your farmer friends do. They're the worst marketers in the world. And I thought, oh, man, that's a pretty kind of a low blow, man. And I started thinking more about that, though. And as I traveled around, we started talking more. Why they're poor marketers in general, a lot of times, is because they have a lot more stress. I mean, they're a lot more worried about the decision. So it makes them hesitate and pause because you're looking around the house and there's your kids, and you knew you grew up in that house, and you're watching them run out in the field. And the last thing you want to do is you be the one that wrecks the train and takes it off the track, and you don't pass it on to your next child. So I think that gets people emotional, and that emotion makes them freeze. And that makes them hesitate on decisions to change the farm. Like you said, you got to take emotion out of the farm. Well, that's pretty tough when you're seeing your kids run around the front yard at the farm, and emotion is there. It's just really hard Like, you see it every day. What do you see? We got guys now calling us up, and I'll just be honest with you. I've been on the phone a few times this last year. Guys have breakdowns on the phone and crying and losing it, and just banks didn't renew the line. And they're going to be the one that's why the suicide rate is so high in farming. I mean, you can talk more about that.
Yeah. And that's what we see out there as well. You are right. So when you got 750 beans, right? I mean, Chicago may have 825 beans, but you got to put basis in there. So you're talking about 750 or less for that. That's you're in the red. So you can't make money, but you get the bankers calling you looking for your money or not wanting to give you an operating loan for the next year. You got a family. You're trying to get your kids to come back to their farm or somebody else to come to their farm. Nobody wants to come because they see the same thing. No work. At the same time, a big thing out there, I think FBN is looking at this, is health insurance. That's astronomical. We in industry or whatever companies, we got pretty affordable health insurance, right? But if you're on a farm, you're paying $40,000 a year. Wake up one day and you're sick, you're going to have to pay this high deductible of $20,000 for a medical condition, plus your monthly annual premiums are $24,000. I'm not sure if anybody in this room pays that or whatever else, but they're paying a full frontal cost of all this technology, of all access to that. Now, it sounds kind of the end is near kind of thing, but there's a huge opportunity in all this space. We've talked here about labor. You talk to all of our farmers, large farmers, small farmers, it's always about labor. And I think for the folks in this room, if you can find some way to go autonomous trucks, even in Illinois is looking at this, is how can you get autonomous trucks? We got autonomous grain elevators, but they can deliver 24/7 to a grain elevator, 2 o'clock in the morning, so you avoid all the congestion. So we're looking for these type of efficiencies, because a farmer's time sitting in a truck or a farm hand sitting in a truck, sitting in a line, trying to deliver commodities someplace, that's money wasted, right? So if you can do it 24/7, that's wonderful. So we're looking for those type of operational increased efficiencies that would be phenomenal for our industry. And there's a vast number of opportunities. Now back to the culture, real quick. I was just in India with some of our board members, meeting with Microsoft. Microsoft wants to come out with its own suite of integrated tools for the agriculture industry. Those that in the 80s, remember we had WordStar, right? WordStar, WordPerfect. I can't remember some of these things because they're all gone. But then you had Microsoft came out with this Office suites. And that's what they want to kind of do in our space as well. Come out with this suite that's from bottom all the way to the top. And to be honest with you, like we're saying here is our farmers were scared. Extremely scared of that. Instead of adopting it and saying, all right, how can I navigate in this world, take advantage of this, be an early adopter and move it forward? Before they were in the room, it was not positive for them because they know that everybody else in the value chain is going to be taking advantage of the software and squeezing them even more so that you are just operating on a 2% margin or whatever that margin would be. And that's just not attractive.
I agree. Tim, let's switch it up a little bit and kind of talk about investor and tech money perspective and kind of where we're talking backstage where that maybe gets lost a little.
Yeah, I just think that one of the things that we really need to realize is that while I believe sincerely that the future will be more automated decision making, I think there will be an internet of farming things. I think there will be an underlying technology with blockchain. We will clearly know where our food's grown, where it's come from. We'll know all of those things. But the reality is we are still, by and large, facing two challenges, and that's still compliance and regulation. And the farm is basically still living in a paper and spreadsheet world. And that is a challenge to try to step into that world and to make a difference for the grower. And I think that's where we're headed. And I think that, although the ag industry employs more folks than any other industry, we are the least digitized industry. And so I think there's a huge opportunity there to do some great things with that space and try to address some of those challenges from a startup and investment standpoint.
We're supposed to be taking some questions. I don't know if that's, want to go ahead and start that. Yeah. If anyone has any questions. Not, we'll continue to talk away. Go ahead, Gary. What are your thoughts on how we proceed and move forward? Just in tech in general, where do you think we're going to see the largest impact in the ag?
Yeah, so I know a few years ago that the drone industry was getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And when I was going out to VCs and I was saying, we have a pain point here with labor that is not going away, and in fact, it's going to get much worse. And we've got there's already $1 billion being spent a year on harvesting just strawberries in the U.S. Just the U.S. just strawberries, one crop. So I mean, it's probably a $20 billion industry. But you know, the VC community is a little slow to move on something that's hardware related. So I think there's a little bit of a disconnect, though. I mean, it's like why John Dillinger robbed banks, because that's where the money is. The money is in in the harvest labor. That money's already being spent. So I don't, that it's always baffled me. You have a ready built market that you have growers ready and willing to adopt, and the money wasn't flowing there. It was flowing to something that they had to go out and try to sell. Yeah, and my business model, we didn't build any money in for marketing. It's all in R&D.
We have a lot of daring entrepreneurs I know in the room. We've kicked this around a couple of times. I've had to talk with a few other people. We watched FarmersOnly.com. The whole Farmers Only dating site. I watched that thing start. I was a keynote at Louisville Farm Show. That guy started in a little bitty booth, had some Polaroid pictures up. We laughed at him. We said, "There is no way this guy's going to make it," and it blew up. But we talk about the labor market, and we said if someone could come up with a temporary service, some type of temp service for labor in farming that could provide, good quality, decent skilled, provide some insurance, provide things. I mean, I think they could make it just really haul it in.
Well, Kevin, I think though that one point is that even though the world population's increasing, the world right now is at peak child. 7.6 billion people in the world today, 2 billion kids under 15. By the time the world gets to 10 billion population, still 2 billion. So, a lot of these jobs, at least in my specialty crop industry, they require young people currently. And so I think automation is the only real path forward. I mean, there's going to be some, I think, short-term fixes, like we utilize the H-2A guest worker program right now. So we get labor in from Mexico. But I tell people that's a short-term solution because the Mexican demographics are about the same as the U.S. right now. Mexico is going to be a net importer of labor in the next 10 years. And people look at me and baffled when I say that. But so, I guess Africa is the only continent where there's, the population is actually growing.
True. Question? Someone have a question? Can't see. Yeah.
I think you make a really good point about engaging farmers and growers because, farmers and growers today, they're being told by a lot of different people they need to do this, they need to do that. Farmers don't need to be told what to do. Farmers need a way to reach out to folks in this room to collaborate avenues where they can work together. And farmers don't necessarily need to be the guinea pigs. People in this room need to work with farmers to collaborate and share vested interest in both the success and potential failures of any innovation we're bringing. My question to the panel is kind of similar to my question yesterday, and I think y'all hit on it a little bit, but for growers that may not be in this room that are looking to innovate, that are looking to reach to people in this room and folks in this room that want to reach those growers, what are good avenues? What are good networking groups? What are some outreach programs that both these groups that we're talking about can utilize to get together and work together?
I can touch on that. Most of your states have a corn, soybean groups. They'll have other associations in the state, and that's one thing we're trying to do in Illinois. Is really there's another event in Chicago in July talking about ag tech, ag investing. In this kind of space, and that's what we want to do as a soybean association is start making that connectivity, having access to producers for you all to have that kind of access to producers. You can do it right now, but really you may want to touch on your farm bureaus, your corn, your soybeans, your pork, your beef, your dairy. Tap into those associations. They have access to the producers in those spaces, and it can give you maybe not special access, but can find the unique target audience maybe you're looking for. So I would say reach out to those folks. I've got a lot of young farmer friends. They're doing that themselves, to be honest with you. They're using their own Facebook, their own Snapchat, or whatever you want to call it. You can see I'm out of tune with that. But those kind of things, they're talking to their neighbors. Now, their neighbors, people across other states on how to do things differently. So it seems to be that younger generation seems to be finding the solution for themselves to a big degree. But again, don't forget about our type of groups, because that's what we're there for, really, is to help you visit with them and to make everybody, frankly, a better industry for ourselves.
And honestly, if you really get right down to it on how our business blew up and really took off and went crazy, it was simply that I provided a dialect between the two parties. I mean, I worked in Chicago at the Board of Trade and Merck and could speak the lingo of the business CEO and the ag tech startup, but I also grew up in a small rural town and knew the lingo of the farmer. I think you're seeing that now. I think Farm Journal's doing a great job. I think Farm Progress, the guys that I know that are in the media that are here today, I mean, I think they do a great job and have pivoted to some degree to try and do a better, what you're saying, to facilitate that at their meetings and some of their events, to bring the two parties more together, like you're saying, in some type of coalition. And that's what Carter will pick my brain. I'm working with Organics right now to try and get groups just like you're saying. We went out to 13. We picked out select farmers in certain states with different types of soil types, and Organics trying to break into the ag side of it. And we did experiments, and we're doing test trials and plots and working with the farmer hand in hand. And I'm agreeing with you. That's what has to happen. That has to happen. So I know Carter and his team at iSelect are trying to facilitate that for all of their platform, their people on their platforms. We try and help with that. I know they're doing some things with Farm Journal. I know they're doing things with family farms. And if you have any input and advice and you want to give it to Carter or we would love to help you in any way build those groups and form those things that can help the ag tech guys and help you see it and use it, like you're saying, to try it and just try and figure it out on your own. Like you said, you don't want to be told what to do. You want to try and get it figured out and see if it works for your operation. So great point.
Ag Launch is a good group for that. We're working with them. They're coming into Illinois and other Midwestern states. Great model, a really great model to get out there.
Anyone else have anything? Yes.
Yeah, Mark Zellweger. In defense of Gary, my question to the VCs that are here today is, he's replacing one cost to his business with a more efficient cost. Help me explain why that isn't a good investment model.
Okay, and he touched on this backstage. You know, Gary's going to come to you at your farm and he's going to make your automation more efficient. It's going to cost you $5 an acre. I got a guy over here, Organics, is going to come to you and he's going to make your soil more efficient with his microbials. That's going to be $4 an acre. I got a guy over here that's going to come and make my chemical side more efficient. $5. Granular's going to come and hit me with a nice little pit. Climate Corp's going to come and hit me with $5 on that. I need satellite imagery. And my friends at Farm Logs, they're probably going to ding me a little too. And I can just start naming every ag tech startup in here. It adds up. And all I'm saying is, when you don't, it depends what your ultimate game is. Is your ultimate game to make money? Is your ultimate game to just be a really cool, efficient farm?
Well, when you say efficient, though, to me, efficient means it's less expensive. So if you're creating efficiency and you're
That's not
lowering
necessarily
costs,
true. I would debate that, highly debate that. I got friends that have $4.50 break even on corn. They're the most efficient farm I've ever seen. And I got a farm in Brazil that's not efficient at all, and it cleans up on them. So I would
argue
debate.
they're
I
more
would debate
efficient.
that wholly on if you're going to be more profitable by being more efficient. I'm not sure of that. I question that because I'm just watching it play out in the space right now.
Yeah, I've heard it said that our industry in farming is one of the few industries that we try to drive costs down all the time and lower our costs. And once we do that, we just facilitate our ability to sell it cheaper. And we lower costs so we can sell cheaper, basically.
Right. No, yeah, and I think from a business owner standpoint, you're all trying to think of ways that the farmer can pay you to become more efficient. And all I'm saying is you start to add all of that up, and it's real tricky. Another question out there before we end. We're getting close here. And that's exactly what we're kind of arguing up here. He just simply said, in his world, technology, which we believe comes on, it makes things more deflationary, devalues the price of corn and soybeans, but at the same time, his input costs are going higher. How does that match? How does that work? That's the magic question in this room. Do you guys agree?
Well, I agree
That's a great
100%.
one to end on.
Well, I add this to the thing as well, blockchain. We always hear about blockchain. The ABC we know as a producer group, right? We know everybody out there is looking at some way to capitalize on blockchain. We are trying to find a way that farmers can capitalize on blockchain, right? Because we know that, again, the ABCDs, the input suppliers, everybody's looking at blockchain to really squeeze producers. Our role, people on this panel up here, is how can we use blockchain for farmers, not just for everybody else. But if you want to help out in that space, let's talk. Because we got a program, we're trying to get that started to really figure that out. I'll stop there, sorry.
Perfect. You guys got a couple closing thoughts? He's giving me the signal and we'll be done.
Oh, we're good.
You good?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
everybody good? Thank you guys for having us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much to Tim Woods, Gary Wishnatzki, Craig Ratajczyk, and Kevin Van Trump. Some good stuff.